Hey YouTube, welcome back to my kitchen. Today, as promised, I'm going to be showing you how to make homemade chicken stock from some leftover chicken carcasses, and I'm going to be using a selection of vegetables as well and herbs. You can modify this recipe in many ways, which I'll be discussing more later. And I've got my big pot over here ready on the stove to go. I actually wanted to mention that. So this is actually my husband's 5-gallon pot that he uses for beer brewing. He does homebrew in his spare time. And so if you don't have a pot this size, I have also used 2 different pots. I used a 4 and a 6-quart pot and just divided the ingredients, and then at the end I combined the stock so it was all the same. Or you can obviously also just cut the recipe if you don't have enough space to hold all the ingredients. Before we get started, I wanted to go over our ingredients list. So I've got 6 carrots here, washed but unpeeled. The recipe calls for 4 stalks of celery, but I really like celery, so I've got 6 stalks here. I've got 4 parsnips. The recipe calls for 3 yellow onions, but my store didn't have yellow onions today, so I got 1 sweet and 2 white, and that's the beauty of this recipe. You can use whatever you've got. You can totally omit all of these ingredients, all of these vegetables if you don't want those. I just really feel like they enhance the flavor a lot. So besides those, I've got 4 Roma tomatoes, which is not included in the recipe, but I added them last time and I really liked the effect. Tomatoes are a great source of umami, so I'm going ahead and adding those. 1 head of garlic. I've got a bunch of parsley, and then the recipe calls for dill and thyme, but I have a really hard time at my store finding especially fresh herbs that are not parsley or cilantro. So in lieu of dill and thyme, I got this poultry herb blend, which actually does have thyme in it. And you'll see I got the ones that were about to expire to save a little bit of money, but also you can use, if you've got some old vegetables in your fridge, not necessarily these, but I really highly recommend at least onion, carrot, and celery. But if you've got any vegetables that you're about to throw away that are not quite rotten, but they're getting kind of soft, or you wouldn't really want to serve them alone as a side or anything like that, this is a great way to use those. People also have recommended to save your onion skins and carrot peels, and if you use parsnips, parsnip peels, tomato skins or anything like that, garlic skins, save all of the like junk that you would throw away, or put in your compost pile or give to your animals, and put them in a freezer bag and save them until you're ready to make stock. Another great way. This recipe is really a fantastic way to eliminate food waste, and so I highly recommend giving this a try, even if you've just got some of the things. If you've got the chicken carcass and any of these, or even other vegetables, you're golden. I think a lot of y'all are going to be blown away by how easy this recipe is. It's like probably the easiest thing I've ever made. You don't have to peel or skin anything. I'm just going to quarter the onions. And I'm going to get everything added to this bowl so that once I get my chicken in the pots and start heating, I can add the vegetables on top. I'm just going to go ahead and cut these one more time. I've also seen garlic broth, like Better Than Bouillon, the little condensed, make your own soup jars and on the soup aisle. For garlic broth, and so I'm thinking about trying to do a garlic broth recipe sometime. And also, now that I'm thinking about it, I would probably also really like an onion broth. So just some ideas for if you've got any extra, if you have an overproductive garden that you need to get rid of some vegetables. Or I'm also going to, I haven't made vegetable stock yet, but that's on my to-do list. So is beef stock. I typically use my ham bones to make black-eyed pea soup or something like that. So I haven't made pork stock yet, But honestly, like, there are so many different ways that you could do something similar. And if you are using leftover ingredients, you're basically getting everything, this whole batch for free, because if you're using the refuse that you would have thrown away, like just onion skins and carrot peels and celery leaves and things like that, that's basically free. You were gonna throw it away. Same thing with the chicken. It was going to be thrown away, so that's basically a free ingredient. And if you have a 5-gallon pot, that's a lot of stock that'll last a good amount of time. So, and you won't get 5 gallons of stock because there is room taken up by all of this bulk, but you do get a good amount. I think last time I got 60 cups or something like that. And I'm just giving everything a rough chop. It does not have to be perfect. They don't have to be the same size. This is going to be cooking all day. So I guess this guy was ready to be cut up. Another great thing about this recipe is you can just get it going in the morning and then forget about it until like 12 hours later. And trust me, by then you will not have forgotten. It'll smell so good in your house. These parsnips smell pretty good. I've never used a parsnip other than in chicken stock, so if you've got any recommendations on how I can use these in other ways, I would love to hear it down in the comments. And the last time I made chicken stock was in August, so it's been about 4 months ago. And I used the entire 60 cups in 4 months, so some things that I love to use my homemade chicken stock in, obviously things like chicken and dumplings or chicken stew. Cornbread dressing, I just used it for Thanksgiving and that. Baked potato soup, cheese broccoli soup. Let's see, what else? Oh my gosh, my green beans. How could I forget? I feel like that's probably one of the best things I cook is green beans. If you have any requests for recipes that I mention or just that you want to see, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your recommendations, and I've got plenty of videos planned, but obviously I want to give y'all what y'all want to, so let me know what y'all want to see. Otherwise, I'll just go through my list of things I've got planned. Okay, back over to the pot. I think I mentioned in my chicken cutting video that I like to wait until I have 3 chicken carcasses before I make stock, so that's what I have here. And this time, this is actually the most varied way that I've got my chickens in the same stock. I've made chicken stock with just raw chickens. I've made chicken stock with 1 raw and 2 baked chickens. Here I've got 1 raw, this one's raw, this one's baked, and then this one is smoked. So I'm really excited to see how this turns out at the end. And I also found something in my freezer I forgot I had put in there pretty recently actually. I found some leek tops over here, so I'm gonna cut these up real quick so I can toss these in as well. I went ahead and put all the vegetables and herbs on top of the chicken, and look at how full this 5-gallon pot is. It is very full. And it already smells so good with all these herbs on top, even though I haven't even turned the heat on, so I'm really excited. There's still a few things I need to add, just really salt and pepper. So I will need 2 tablespoons of salt. And I'll say this chicken stock is pretty low sodium. You'll probably want to add more salt to whatever you're cooking with, with the stock. But I like that because then you have more control later on, and it doesn't matter what you're making. You always, like, there will not be too much salt, but it'll still taste good and salty. And then the recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of black peppercorns, but we like our pepper in this house, so I'm gonna do probably a tablespoon. And these will completely dissolve during the cooking process. So I don't have to crack them or anything like that. We're almost done with the hands-on time. We just need to add water to this to barely cover the herbs. It's gonna be pretty close to the top of the rim of the pot just because of how full the pot is, but it's fine. Just don't bring the stock to a rolling boil. Keep it at a low simmer. Simmer it. I would recommend 12 hours. The recipe says you can do as little as 4. I've done 12 every time, and I really like the flavor profile that I've gotten. So, and also it's just kind of easy to remember if you start it at, it's 10:13. So I'll turn the boil off at about 10:15 tonight, and I'll come back and let you know how we can finish it up then. So I've been talking a lot about how this recipe is totally customizable. You can do it based on whatever flavors you like or whatever you've got in your garden or in your fridge. And that's true if you are going to be freezing or dehydrating the stock. If you're going to be canning it, I would do a little bit more research. I'm not an expert on canning yet. I've never pressure canned anything. I have water bath canned some pickles and some tomato sauce or pizza sauce once. So I've heard through a little bit of research before starting to get into that you really need to be careful about what recipes you use when you're canning. So I would use, what I've been recommended is to use the Ball brand cookbook. Basically, it's a food preservation book. They have recipes for all kinds of stuff, and it'll make sure that you have the right amount of salt or vinegar or whatever preservative that you need to keep it shelf stable for as long as the canning process recommends. So while I'm saying yes, totally use what you have, customize it, make it how you like, I want to make the caveat that you need to keep food safety in mind, and so if you're going to be canning it and you're new at canning, do a little bit more research before you try and can this. If you're an expert canner and you come up with your own canning recipes, this may be modified in some ways to be able to can it. I just don't want to say, yes, you can do that, because I don't know. So I wanted to just put that quick little caveat in there. So I am almost up to 2 hours into the cooking process. I wanted to give y'all a quick update. If y'all are following Ina's recipe, this is about halfway through the cooking process. It's only 2 out of the 12 hours of my recommended cook time, but as you can see, it's almost overflowing, and I didn't put this much water into it. It still had about 1 inch of headspace when I started the simmer, but the fat in the chicken has started to render out, as you can see there, and so it's kind of puffing it up a little bit and giving it some more volume, so I'm gonna push it back down with my spoon and it should be fine. I also turned the heat down. It was on about 8, just so that I could get the boil going, or the simmer going, just because this pot is so huge it takes a little while. But now it's down closer to 6, and I'll probably honestly put it down to 5 in just a second. Well, I just got back from running a few errands, and I have just passed the 4-hour mark, so this is what the soup will look like, or should look like, if you follow the recipe in the description box. You see we've gotten this nice golden color. The tomatoes and everything are very cooked down. We're starting to get some wrinkling of the skin of the tomatoes, and everything is just really nice and soft. So honestly, you could call it at this point, and if you want to go ahead and only cook it for 4 hours, you can skip ahead to when I start to strain out everything from the soup, and then I've got a few more steps to go through after that before we're ready to put it in freezer bags and freeze it. But I just wanted to go ahead and give you a quick update at the 4-hour mark. And also, by the way, I should have mentioned this at the 2-hour mark. It already smelled so good at that point. Honestly, it smelled pretty good after an hour, but my house smells so amazing right now. It reminds me of going over to Granny and Papa's house. Honestly, every time I cook with fresh herbs, I think that. So I don't know if it's the thyme or the parsley or what, but it just really smells homey and comforting to me. But anyway, I will stop the video now and I will be back at around 10:15 tonight to go over the last few steps. Well, I lied. I said I would be back at 12 hours, but I'm actually about to film another video and happened to notice that I'm right about at the halfway mark. I'm right about 6 hours out of the 12. And I just was like, well, I'll go ahead and give another update. And as you can see, things are really starting to break down nicely, especially the onions. I don't see any more tomatoes. Here's a little piece of tomato. The chicken's floating up to the top. It's really looking good. And I mean, I've never tried to make chicken stock with only 4 hours. I'm sure it's fine. But as you can see, the longer you let it sit, the better it's gonna get. So I'll go ahead and turn the camera off, start doing my next video, and I will be back to this at 12 hours. Well, I am a little bit late. It's about 10:45 p.m. While I was cooking dinner, I got the text that my sister's baby was born, so I just got back from going to see them. That was really awesome, and so now I will show you what the soup looks like, what the stock looks like after 12.5-ish hours of cooking, and just quickly go over the last few steps. As you can see, this is cooked down quite a bit. I'd say maybe about 1.5 or 2 inches. I filled it to just below this first rivet right there, so you can kind of see where the fill line was. Here's where it is now, and look how nice and broken down everything is. And I don't know how well you can tell, but the color of this is just such a much more rich golden color. And so I'm really excited for this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a clean pot out, my next biggest pot. I'll get that out with my strainer, and I'm going to strain this out, strain out all the solids. This is a bit of a time-consuming process, so bear with me while I get that done, and then we're almost going to be ready. Alright, I've got all the solids strained out, and look at that nice rich dark color. I'm gonna let this cool in the fridge overnight covered, and then once the fat has set, I will skim that off the top, and I'll be back then. So this is the next day. As you can see, the fat has congealed at the top, it's all risen, and the big pot's not quite set all the way. The smaller pot had way less fat in it, which is because this is what I skimmed off at the very end. So I took all the fat off the top and put it in the big pot, but I'll skim this off and use it for dinner tonight, and I'll come back when the big pot is fully set. Okay, it is the next day again. Actually, today is 2 days after I filmed the beginning of the video on Sunday, and it is now Wednesday. And I'm not going to show you how I put it, how I store it, because I wouldn't recommend the way that I do, but I did want to show you how the fat has solidified on the top. I'm just going to grab a knife and kind of run it around the edge to loosen it. You can see it's kind of already cracked a little bit, which is fine. I'm just going to separate this and gently spoon it out. And I do like to save this. You can use it to make tortillas, or honestly, you could probably substitute it instead of butter for a lot of purposes. I made chicken enchiladas that way. I sauteed the onions and peppers and everything in the chicken fat that I reserved from the other pot. But I will just store that in my fridge, and I'm going to portion this out now and freeze it. And I hope that you have gotten something out of this video. Let me know if you want to see anything specific that I make with this chicken stock. I did actually use the other pot, the smaller pot, yesterday to make chicken stew. actually was chicken and dumplings, and wow, it is as rich as it looks. It was really delicious. Probably the best batch I've made so far. So let me know in the comments if you want to see anything specific, and I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a like if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to get notified when I come out with new content, make sure to hit that bell, and I will see you next time.